Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cage Conversations podcast, the podcast where I yap and play video games for the enjoyment of my girlfriend. Today, we are playing Gotham Knights. Like I said in the last episode, did not want to play Street Fighter again for the third video in a row, so that is why we are playing a different game now. I started this game a couple years ago and I wasn't that into it, and so I stopped. Essentially, right, it's a Batman game, but instead of playing as Batman, you play as the other members of the Bat family, specifically Robin, Nightwing, Batgirl, and Red Hood. Um, and so, you know, to give context for why me and a lot of people weren't really rocking with this game when it came out, there was a series of Batman games called the Arkham games, and the most recent one came out in 2015, and it was really good. And then, well, there were some issues, but overall, it was good. And then Gotham Knights comes out in 2022, the next quote unquote Batman game after the Arkham games, and it is not as good. It's 7 years later, 2022, when it's released, and it visually looks worse, and the gameplay doesn't feel as good. But I recently saw a YouTube video saying that it has its own merit, and so I was like, you know what, I will try it again and see what we can do with it. Right, so I'm going to be playing this. I'm probably just going to have this be the game I play until I beat it. So yeah, that's the situation. Um, yeah. And then before I get into the actual topic of today, I wanted to talk about just a brief little part two from the last video. Last video we talked about um, how the internet is essentially a tool of hyper socialization, right? It socializes men and women towards um, these ideals that society has for us and keeps us from getting counter messaging that shows us that those ideals are dumb, right? And so when we look at that, one of the big examples, right, is the idea of like what happens if someone that is terminally online gets rejected, right, by the opposite sex. A man, if they are terminally online, more likely to become an incel. And a girl who is terminally online, more likely to become a pick me. And I think that that goes into the theory that I posited before, because men are socialized to be these like isolated freaks, right? These socially inept freaks. That's what society wants us to become, and so that's what the internet turns us into. But women are supposed to be dependent on male validation. That is what society wants them to be. So, when a woman is rejected and spends too much time online, they will become pick me's, and they will uh, become more obsessed with obtaining male validation. So, that was an example that I thought of after the last episode, and I just wanted to, just bring that up as further evidence for that theory that I have. But yeah, let's get into the actual topic of today. So I want to talk about the Young Turks, right? So the Young Turks is essentially this progressive news organization. Ostensibly, that's what they advertise themselves as, right? And to get an example, just a baseline understanding of what exactly that means, I would say that they're a news organization, online news organization, primarily off of YouTube, that closely aligns its beliefs and stances with the political views of Bernie Sanders, right? I think that for the most part, they are politically aligned and have been for a long time. Um, but I will say maybe not so much anymore, right? and we'll get into that, right? So the Young Turks, it was started by this guy named Cenk Uygur, and the his primary co-host for a majority of it, right, is this woman named Anna Kasparian. And so I started watching the Young Turks in 2016, like a lot of people. They were giving a a progressive, more left-leaning perspective of the Trump administration and the election and that kind of thing. And I was very much interested in that, right? But around 2024, they started to shift their messaging, right? Especially around the 2024 election. There was a lot more anti-homeless rhetoric coming from them. Um, Even at one point, they stated or made the claim that those California fires that happened back in 2024, those were caused by the homeless because they smoke drugs outside and have like open barrels of fire and that kind of thing. Although there is absolutely no evidence to point towards that, right? And I understand that Anna, well, to be clear, right? Anna Kasparian has stated that she has had a traumatic experience with a homeless person, like around the time that her messaging changed, that changed her perspective of the whole situation. And, I am sympathetic towards that, but I do not think it's an excuse to, demonize an entire group of people because one person did something bad, right? Again, it'd be like if she was terrorized by an African American person, would I be okay with her say like becoming a racist? It's like no, I would not, right? Additionally, uh Anna Kasparian started to downplay the horrors of a Trump 2.0 presidency. She started saying that Project 2025 isn't real. Cenk Uygur, after the election, started doing the same thing. He got into an argument with one of the Young Turks, news collaborators, essentially, Francesca Fiorentini, who was really great. And they got into an argument about whether or not there would be concentration camps. Um, and, in the future, it's clear that there are concentration camps in America. And because of their argument, he fired her. He said that she was banned from being on any other Young Turks affiliated shows. So that's the situation, right? Like there's a perceived and I believe a actual right wing shift inside of the Young Turks, both from Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian, right? And so that's the context. And so recently they had a show, and in the show they talked about Andrew Schultz and his saying that he didn't expect things to be that bad, as bad as they would be with the whole ICE thing, and because of that, they did a whole segment of that, and Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur talked about how we have to be, forgiving and welcoming of our political, you know, enemies that decide to change direction, right? And I think that, and a lot of people think that this decision and this like coverage is very self-interested, right? I think that the same way that they want people to forgive Andrew Schultz is the way that they want people to forgive them for their right wing shift. Um, I did think also think that there is additional justifications. At least I think that's a hidden justification or a reason why they do it. But I think they also have outward justifications as well. For that, right? So Cenk Uygur um has said, and also um the Waving the Red Flag podcast, Alvin said the same thing when talking about the forgiveness of Andrew Schultz thing, right? And he said that, and they both are under the belief that like allowing Andrew Schultz back in, if he ever was in, but like being welcoming and forgiving towards Andrew Schultz is important for coalition building, right? and this idea that you have to work with people that you hate. Alvin brought up, right, that MLK had to work with Lyndon B. Johnson, who is a known racist, in order to get the Voting Rights Act passed, right? And while I think that, thinking through that doesn't seem that seems like a intelligent thought process, and I think and it seems like it works, or it's an effective way to go about your political goals. I truly don't believe that it is, and I have a couple points about that. Right. Point one, I think it's it's different when we're talking about like conservative leaders, right? Um, these people are liars and grifters, right? And I think that this goes to not only conservative politicians, but also conservative content creators. I don't think that you're able to actually work with someone like um someone like Ben Shapiro, right? That kind of thing. Um we're never going to convince them to be on our side, right? These people, if they change their position, uh they're only doing so because they believe it will make them the most money, right? And so, again, with Andrew Schultz, it's like, is he actually changing his mind, or does Andrew Schultz realize that he would make more money if he was um anti-ICE, the way that the majority of the country is at this point? um and then uh our second point is the goals of what we are trying to do. I think that when we're talking about um, working with people that we hate or working with people that are political enemies, I think we have to be specific about the goals that we're trying to accomplish. MLK worked with Lyndon B. Johnson, a racist, for the specific goal of getting voting rights, right? Like, that was a specific goal. I don't have any issue with Democrats working with Thomas Massey, who I disagree with a majority of things, for the purpose of prosecuting the Epstein class, right? But after the 2024 election, Cenk Uygur went to a, Turning Point USA. I think that's the name of his organization. He went to a Turning Point USA event, and like, what was the mission of Cenk and Charlie Kirk at that rally, right? Um, what was he work going there for? What was he trying to accomplish? What was he supposedly working with Charlie Kirk for? And I think for him, he would say that he's trying to build this idea of he's trying to have left wing populists and right wing populists um work together on a specific issue, right? But like, these people, these people that are populist, there's a distinct difference, right? And I don't think that that is a worthwhile goal. First of all, right wing populists believe that their their class issues are being caused by identity politics, too many blacks or women or whatever, or undocumented immigrants coming to the country. Left wing populists should believe that their class issues are caused by the Epstein class, right? Like, that's the difference. So, how are you going to get people to agree on a solution if they can't agree on the problem, right? So, there's that. Additionally, um, you know, the idea of like growing a populist movement, again, that's not a goal, right? The spread of ideas is not a goal, right? We're talking about building a coalition to do a specific thing. Again, like prosecuting the Epstein class or getting voting rights for black people. That's not the spreading of awareness is not a real goal, right? Um we all learned about this in school, right? A goal has to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. It's a SMART goal, right? Like that's the acronym for a SMART goal. So like is the spread of populism specific? Is it measurable? How are we going to measure the spread of populism? Is it realistic? Is it time sensitive? Um, is I get the idea of wanting to spread your ideas. Obviously, I have no issue with left wing content creators trying to spread their ideas, and also even like spreading their ideas at a um to an audience that doesn't agree with them, right? But I think that that's not the same thing as going to a situation and being, I guess, welcoming towards um a certain amount of going being welcoming to certain people that disagree with you, just so that they will be willing to work with you on an issue in the future, right? That's the thing that is um that's the thing that is a very weird about this, and that I vehemently disagree with, right? If it was someone saying, I want to I disagree with um someone, if Charlie Kirk said that he was a populist, right? And Cenk Uygur wanted to speak to him, that's one thing. Um but speak to him for what? What are Cenk and Charlie Kirk going to work together to do, right? And there was nothing happened, right, at that rally that Cenk Uygur went to. They just went there, had a conversation, and then it was over, right? What are we actually trying to achieve when we do these things? Same thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? It's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to work with Marjorie Taylor Greene, a person I disagree with, for the purpose of stopping Israel from committing this genocide. Is another thing to welcome Marjorie Taylor Greene into the fold, to sanitize her reputation, any of that kind of thing, because you guys agree on a specific issue. It's, you know, when we have something that we need to work on, we will work on it together. But otherwise, we are political enemies, right? That's something that a lot of people want to have us forget. And there has not been posited a good reason for us to forget that, right? And I think that that goes to this like third point of like this idea of like trying to build a base, right? I think that Cenk Uygur is just as delusional as he claims the mainstream Democratic Party to be, right? Because they're both after this imaginary median voter, right? Kamala Harris, she uh, appealed to Liz Cheney and got the endorsement of like these like conservative figures in order to try and get these like supposed moderates, these supposed conservatives to agree with her and vote for her. And there's no evidence, right, that conservatives are going to be reached that way, right? What there is evidence for is that doing that alienates uh, the more left wing side of the Democratic Party, and because of that, people don't vote, right? How you how you get people that are in the supposed middle and on the right to come to your side is by implementing left leaning ideas, because in polling, left leaning ideas are popular. Um, you don't water down your values, you learn to explain them better, right? So and a perfect example of this is that like a lot more people support the Affordable Care Act than Obamacare. And the reason for that is conservatives are racist and they don't like things that have Obama's name on them, but the people can acknowledge that the Affordable Care Act um is a good thing, not a good enough thing at this point. Things we needed more, but it is um but people that want better health care, uh they don't want the Affordable Care Act to go away, right? They want it to be expanded upon, right? And Um, so I think that that's something that Cenk Uygur is a similar situation, right? This idea that these like right wing or conservative populists are going to come over to the left or work with the left. Again, what is the evidence for that, right? Um, we have no evidence that that is the case, and instead, what you're doing by appealing to them is you are alienating your base. He is alienating the left leaning populace inside of his audience, which is why the Young Turks audience has dwindled because, especially since this election and since Jing started doing this right wing shift. And that is because uh, people, he is not gaining populists from the right and he's losing populists on the left. So that is the situation here, right? Um and this is not me in I saw this right in the I'm on Threads now. I don't use Twitter anymore cuz I literally woke up one day and my entire algorithm was just pornography and I was like, "You know what? This is actually weird and disgusting. I'm off of this." Right? So I have been off Twitter for a couple weeks now. And um what's it called? But on Threads there was this whole talk about people leaving the MAGA movement, right? And what to do about them, right? And I think that when you talk about like how left leaning people should talk about and feel about people that leave the MAGA movement, I think that there's a distinction between famous people and non-famous people, right? People want to act like these people are the same, like famous people are the same and should be treated like the same way as the rest of us, and they shouldn't be. Um, and they only expect to be treated the same way as the rest of us when they're wrong, right? They get so many privileges due to the fact that they're famous, but as soon as they do something wrong, oh, I'm only human. What happened to like humanity and grace? Oh, well, what happened to caring for your fellow man, right? Say that the next time a rich person gets canceled and says that they want to apologize, right? So, at the end of the day, famous people know what they are doing. They are not propagandized into their positions. They are the propaganda, right? Um, and so, if they are famous, I think that yeah, they should be quote unquote canceled. And I mean, that essentially means that they should be. I would avoid uh, giving them any more money, giving them any more of your money. And I don't think that's forever, but I think that when it comes to them, there has to be an admission of what was going on, right? They need to admit not only that they were wrong, but why they were wrong in order for there to be any steps forward, right? The Young Turks, they would have Cenk Uygur would have to acknowledge that he wanted to gain a right wing audience and get right wing money. And that's why the Young Turks took a right wing shift. Unless and until he says that, I'm not watching the Young Turks again. Anna Kasparian would have to point out that her right wing shift came because, you know, her personal issues, she allowed them to become a myopic viewpoint that she listened that clouded her view of the entire political reality. And Andrew Schultz would have to acknowledge that he wanted the popularity that Joe Rogan has, and Joe Rogan, who is a right wing figure, is popular, so he decided to go towards that right wing shift. and they would have to acknowledge these people would have to acknowledge that, and then have a promise to not repeat that same mistake. And unless and until these people are literally not welcome, I don't think that they should be welcome or forgiven. But if they're a regular person that is, leaving the MAGA movement, I think that, yeah, there has to be a process of de-radicalization. Um, I don't think that this is a process that someone does online, right? I think that that is something that should be done with this person's community, right? So this is something that I'm like, if you are a in the world, right, and someone that you know personally says, "Oh, I can't deal with MAGA anymore," then like this, I would say, like as a left leaning person, that you should engage in the process of trying to de radicalize them, right? Because just because they're out of MAGA doesn't mean they don't have the same viewpoints that would have pointed them towards it. So it's up to you to try and reach them and try and figure out what exactly is the problem here. Um, I think it's the same thing with fat shaming, right? It's objectively true. Being fat is not good for you. It's bad for you, right? But like online talking points don't work, right? They're ineffective and they're harmful, right? All they do is shame people, make them feel bad about themselves, cause them to self-harm or to fall into a shame spiral where they gain even more weight. So that it like the idea that any effort or anyone online should be commenting on anyone else's weight, I think is like ridiculous and harmful and dumb. But if you are in community with someone, you should try and help them, right? You should reach out to them like, hey, your brother, your sister, your friend, like, hey, I understand that you're like, it seems like you've like gained a lot of weight recently. Is everything okay? Do you need somebody to go to the gym with you? Do you need help like with your diet, that kind of thing? That's what you do, right? If someone inside of your community has this is caught in this unhealthy situation. And it's the same thing with being a conservative. Being conservative is also bad for you and bad for your community and bad for the world. But I would not confront them online. Um, you should try to you should try to de-radicalize them. Find out what it is that drew them to the MAGA movement and try and break down these stereotypes and assumptions that are in their head. In a uh, and because they are in your community, right? It should be a situation where you know how to speak to them, you know how to talk to them in a way that they would be receptive to, right? I'm not going to say being mean to them is the wrong way or being nice to them is the wrong way. I think it's a situation where you know what people in your life respond to. Some people do respond to being mean to, some people don't. If they're your homie, if they're your family member, if they're your coworker, you should know how that is. And you should know how to speak to them and just speak to them in that way. Um and then um last thing, right, about this whole TYT segment, right? At the end of the TYT segment, Anna says that they're talking about Schultz, and at the end, Anna just says, who cares? Who cares? That the government, um, the, who cares about this like right wing versus left wing, political situation? Because the government is rotten to its core due to what we've learned in the Epstein files, and I just, gotta say a couple things, like brief thing about that. First of all, I don't understand why this person who is a trained journalist, I assume at least has a master's degree, I think, because she's also a college professor in journalism. So I assume at least a master's, probably a doctorate, I think. Why I don't know why this person would be surprised, right? We've all known that the government is bad. What's it called? this I mean, just going back to the CIA, all the horrible things they've done, MK Ultra, all this kind of stuff. We've known what they've done to people. We've known the horrible things they've done to people, and no one was ever held accountable. So why did we think that they were ever going to stop? Right? Obviously, I am shaken up by what's in the Epstein files. I did not know how bad things were going to be and how widespread it was. But like the idea that like there's an evil rot within the American government. I mean, I'm not surprised by that, and I am genuinely surprised that she is acting surprised by it. Um, but then it comes into right the electoralism versus revolution thing, right? And she says elections don't matter, right? But she's also not saying that Americans need to revolt. And so if you're not if you're being if you're doing neither, if you believe in neither, then you're essentially politically ineffective. And at that point, I gotta ask, what's the point of having a political news show, right? If you you're not giving any prescriptions about what people should do about the bad things in the world, you're only reporting about what the bad things are. That's not I think that that is not enough for a journalist, right? Um, I think the process for me personally is you have to do both, right? You have to be willing to do both. Take electoralism as far as it will take you, and then what and also build up community and power while you do that, and then revolt, right? That is I think that's the situation that you have to be in, right? So I don't like it when people say that elections don't matter. I think it's easier to plan for revolution and organize and build community in a good government versus in a bad one. And I also think that you know we don't want to lose anybody's lives while we're under a bad government as well. Any future soldiers. Alex Preddy could have been a future soldier for any revolutionary action if any revolution did come, right? So like, I think that people should vote in the 2026 midterms and these special elections coming up. And if they fail or Trump steals them or sabotages them, or the Supreme Court does something to help the Conservative Party, or the Democrats fail to stop what is happening right now, even though we've elected them specifically to do that, then the only option at that point would be for the American people to start thinking about a revolution, right? Because at that point, electoralism we will have reached the end of how good things can be under electoralism. So that is, I think that's the situation that we're in. I don't like it when people say that like left versus right doesn't matter anymore. There's a greater evil. Um because I mean one side is not willing to fight that evil, and one side um is, or at least should be, right? And so we want to build a base of people that are willing to fight that. um but yeah, that's it. um that's the end of the episode. If you're my girlfriend, I love you. Please let me know what you think next time I see you. If you're not my girlfriend, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.